long story short, this coach is a big name. He starves his athletes, bottom line. I was on a plan that was 500 calories a day, 3 hours of cardio, and I was doing an hour lift every day. I took Sundays off, which was my rest day. But I got to the point where I was 5 days out from my show. I said, like, screw this. Like, I have no desire to even step on stage. And this was 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I was like, I get that this sport is supposed to be hard, but it's not starvation hard. Do you know what I mean? Like, you get into low food, but I don't think it should ever be that low. You want to talk about hormone issues, even if you're not taking stuff, food is so important in hormones. I was literally eating 8 ounces of egg whites in the morning, and then I had 17 ounces of chicken allotted for me the rest of the day, like that. And I had a little bit of, I think I had 300 grams of asparagus. So which I don't even think I was counting asparagus as carbs. It's not carbs. Like that's absurd. Food is important, and good coaching is important, and having somebody that actually cares about your health and well-being is the reason this process can be fun. It's definitely hard, but it's not suffering pain and enduring pain hard. You know what I mean? Part of the reason that I ended up with the coach that, or like going through the process with the coach that I did, was I was seeking approval, especially from him, because he didn't give his approval to just anybody. He didn't post just anybody on his Instagram. Like, he didn't tell a lot of people that they have a lot of potential in the sport. He didn't. I mean, I'm going to be frank. Like, he did this last prep for me. He didn't charge me a dime. Yeah. He told me from day one, he's like, this being your first prep, like, I see you having a lot of potential in this sport. And that was huge for me. I'm like, wow, like, thank you. And so I was like, finally, like, I'm getting some sort of sense of approval from somebody. And it got to the point where I was like, the only approval that I need is from myself. Like, what makes me happy? Why am I doing this? And I know that I've got potential in the sport, because why would he go out of his way to coach me for free? Granted, he wrecked my metabolism for free. Appreciate that. But at the same time, like, I must really have potential, right?
What has your cardio been like, these last couple of months?
So like I said, I got to the point where I
I
was
mean, you were
doing
doing 3
3 hours.
hours, so I don't want to complain about doing 100 minutes, because that's nothing. Was it all in one session, or was it like 3 1-hour sessions, or what?
So I tried to get it out of the way as much as I could. Basically, at the beginning of my prep, I went from 40 minutes or 45 minutes. Within 3 weeks, I was up to, an hour and a half. Which I usually get to the gym at like 5 a.m. And so I just get as much done as I could. Like, I don't have to be in the office, into my work until 9. I'd be there from 5 to 7:30, getting my stuff done. And I tried to keep my workouts, even now, 45 minutes, an hour tops. So that way, and I usually would start with cardio, do an hour, and then do my lift, and then come back and finish up whatever I had. And some days I didn't have time to finish it, and so I'd go back on my lunch break and do, when I was doing an hour and a half, I'd do 30 minutes, or when I got to 2 hours, I'd do an hour at lunch. And then I got to the point where I do 2 hours, I do an hour at lunch, then go back in night and do another hour. I mean, people at the gym knew me by name. Like, everybody there, they're like, "Oh, you're back." I'm like, "Yeah, here again."
How much
Um,
distance were you covering it when in those 3 hours? Did you ever like do the math, or be like, or how many calories were you burning? Because I'm burning like 1,200 calories if I'm on for 100 minutes, so I can't imagine what it's like for you.
I have no idea. I have no idea. It was definitely excessive. Um, Looking back at it, I will never do that again,
I don't
ever.
even understand that willpower that you have, because for me, after I do that 100 minutes, I mean, I have, 2 chicken breasts ready on the grill basically then, and then I have them in about 2 minutes afterwards. So doing that on that low of calories, I mean, that just shows the mental mindset that you need to have. But what was your sleep like when you were going on 500 calories and doing all this cardio? I can't imagine that you were getting that much sleep.
I have never been the kind of person to struggle with insomnia or any of that. I mean, basically, I hit the sack and I'm 5 minutes out. I'm towards the end of my prep, I couldn't sleep. I mean, I was functioning on 4 to 5 hours of sleep, which for me, um, I need at least 7, 7.5 to be a functional human being. I'm not even gonna lie to you. So I did outside sales. So once it got to the point where I could actually drive to go see customers again, I drive from Salt Lake to Ogden, which is about an hour drive there and back home. I don't know how I didn't wreck, but I was constantly falling asleep at the wheel. Energy level was incredibly low. Um, and the reason I decided not to do my show is because honestly, my whole mental health hit the wall. Um, the reason I got Kai in the beginning was he was my service dog,
I remember
right?
that. Yep.
Yeah, so I got him for anxiety attacks. And shortly after we talked, the first podcast, I met my husband. So we had our podcast in September. I met him in about October. And so uh, basically meeting him really helped me come out of that. And I hadn't had an anxiety attack in 2 years. So it got to the point where I probably am oversharing my thoughts and my feelings, but I think it's really important for people to know that it's not
One
okay.
thousand percent.
Um,
Yeah.
I got to the point where I mean, it was the Sunday before that show, so it was 6 days out. It was my husband's birthday. Um, and I had been like baking the whole week before. Like I just was like, I need something to do with all this anxiety. Essentially, I needed something to do. I didn't have any. It got to the point where I didn't even have the attention span for TV. So you talk about like watching TV on cardio. I did that for a while, and I was running out of stuff to watch as well. But then it got to the point where I didn't even have the attention span. Like I couldn't focus, I couldn't think. And so I'd turn it on, but I didn't ever like watch it. So I would just walk on the treadmill in silence. Like I was just a zombie. And going back to like baking, like I just was baking and it was gave me something to do and I was like, at least I can just smell the food, which was fine. And then for my husband's birthday, like I made him all of his favorite foods, which stupidly enough, they're my favorite foods too. So I made like this French toast casserole, which is
Oh,
basically it's got cream cheese and cinnamon chip bread, and it's got like an egg, whatever you do for French toast, but it's like on crack. It's amazing. Uh, so I made that, and then I made him like a carrot cake for his birthday because it's his favorite. I made sourdough bread and all that to like take to dinner. And we went to my parents' house, and I just was miserable. Like I had been really good on my prep to, like I said, I just avoided people because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. And so in that sense, like I just didn't really talk to people so I wasn't mean, but I also wasn't necessarily present. And my brother-in-law, I was sitting there at the table and I was eating my riced cauliflower and my chicken, and he was like I was almost in tears, and he's just like, and I might cry even talking about it. He's like, "What brings you joy?" And I kind of just looked at him, and I was like, looked at my food, and I was like, my chicken and my cauliflower. Like, I don't even know how to answer that question. And looking back at it now, it's like, what brings me joy is my relationship. It's my dogs. It's my job. It's um my stupid goats out in the backyard. Like being able to take care of my animals, my friendships, and I had just completely lost all of that. Um, and the next day, I mean, if I showed you the look on my face, the pictures that I sent in the morning, because the coach that I had was constantly like, basically, he's like, you're really close to stage lean, but you're not quite there. And just constantly, I check in with him, and it never was positive feedback. It was always not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. And really pushing that, like, I'm just not going to be good enough mindset. And I was sad. I was starving. I was depleted. I was sad. I had nothing to look forward to. And I had like an anxiety attack. I had suicidal thoughts. And I was like, whoa, I was like, I haven't had these feelings in 2 years. And I can pinpoint the exact reason why. And it was nutrition, food. And not that I need to eat my feelings, but I needed to eat. So I reached out to my coach and I said, hey, this is how I'm feeling. You know, I I feel like I've accomplished my goals. My goal was to set myself up for a better prep. Like I didn't even think a show was gonna happen. This prep felt really rushed. I was like, I don't even want to step on stage on Saturday. And I had already paid for the show at this point. And in my mind, he wasn't even it was still on the fence whether or not he was gonna let me step on stage. So working my ass off, starving my body, it was never good enough. Um, yeah, it was stupid. And so he was like, you know how many people reach out to me like this close to a show, like this shows what kind of athlete you are, like push through it, like we're in this together. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like if I say I'm done, like I am the first. You look at the that I put myself through and tell me that I like this. I was like, I can starve for another 5 days. 5 days is nothing. The fact is I don't want to. Like I don't even. I was like, if I do it, I was like, if I push for another 5 days, I'm selling my suit. I'm throwing my heels away, and I'm never doing this again. Um, Either that, or I'm probably not going to be here anymore because I do something stupid, which is not even in reality is not even who I really truly am. You know. So I was like, screw it. He's like, would it help if I gave you some food back? And I was like, well, probably. So what he did was he gave me 15 extra almonds a day, which I wasn't eating any fats at that point. So just to have fats back. So, I came home. I talked to my husband. He's like, just come home and eat some food. And I just broke into tears. And I was like, I feel like I can't, like all this accountability and letting people down. And I was like, screw this. Like, if I decide not to do it, it's because of me. It's because it's my own choice. This is something that if I want it, go do it. If I don't, then why do it? And I had told everyone that I was doing a show. I had told people that I paid for it, whatever. And it's like, who cares? Um, and anyways, I came home. I ate some chicken. I ate my asparagus, and then I had 15 almonds, and I ate the almonds, and I was like, screw this. Like, I went and got a breakfast burrito from Beto's. I took 3 bites and then I just wanted to taste it, right? I took 3 bites, gave it to my husband. And then I came home from work. I also went back to work and one of my coworkers was like, man, you must have had some carbs or something. And I was like, what makes you say that? He's like, your whole mood has just changed. Like significantly. Like I walked in that morning and I was just a zombie. I was just a body. Like I was miserable. I was almost in tears at work. Like that's not me. Um, and I came in like all chipper and ready to go. And I hadn't even like eaten really that much food, right? Like it was just I ate something. And then later that night I didn't overdo it, but I ate. Um, the next day I started to feel a little bit guilty. I didn't binge by any means, but I definitely didn't stick to my plan. I had check-ins with my coach the next day that I was feeling really anxious about, so I kind of like was like, well, I'll go back to the plan tomorrow. Like this is the binge eating mentality, right? It's like, well, I got to go back strict tomorrow, so I'm gonna eat whatever I want right now. And I'm like, no, like reel it in a little bit. Like who knows what's gonna happen? Just eat some food, but don't overdo it. Anyways, checked in with him the next morning, and it wasn't. I just sent him a long email. I said, look, like I know in your eyes you're just gonna see it as failure. Bottom line is I got to the point where I didn't want to do it. Mentally, physically, emotionally, like wasn't what I wanted. Um, and I said I'd like to start a reverse diet. He texted me back 5 minutes later and was like, "I'm pissed." I was like, "Okay." Um, and then continued to say that I'm not okay with the reverse. He goes, "That's chicken." I was like, "Okay." So I said, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "I don't know." Didn't respond for 4 hours. Let me just sit there and soak in feelings of like regret or anxiety. And I was on the treadmill at that point when he texted me and when he let me just sit there and think about it. And I started to feel really anxious and like just really negative feelings about myself. And I was like, screw this. Like I made this decision. Like I know that in my heart, like that was best for me. Um, and he's playing games. Like he's trying to make me feel bad and he's trying to guilt trip me and he's trying to like just I'm like, that's not coaching. And basically I texted him, I said, look, like I know you're upset. Bottom line is I'm in a hole, right? Like I'm in a caloric deficit. I can't do a reverse without you. I said, I need help getting out of it. And he texted me back 4 hours later and gave me a reverse diet plan. And I'm like, thanks. Um, and at that point I had reached out to a different coach. And we had talked a little bit a few days after that. And then we started the intuitive eating and then we started my plan. Um, it just goes to show like, well, and I had never used anybody else, right? So I didn't know what good coaching was like. And not only that, he is a huge name in Utah, huge name. Um, and no, everyone's scared to talk about it. Honestly, it'll be interesting to see who listens to this and where it goes. Um, and hopefully, I mean,
Just to let everyone
it,
know, I had no intention of this. Everyone blame her, not me.
oh,
It's Lexi's
I
fault.
think
No,
don't blame
I'm just kidding, everyone. No, I mean, no,
no.
no.
Here's the thing: is everyone is. I am not the only athlete he's done this to.
I
I
Here's the
can.
thing. I think I
Oh,
know who you're talking about. I'm not going to mention names on here because I've had like 6 or 7 similar stories to this. After we're done recording, I'll ask you the name and then I'll see if it's the one that I know. But yeah, I have heard very similar. So yeah, it definitely is out there in the sport. I can confirm to everyone.
yeah. Well, and people can go on my Instagram page, and I'm not going to hide who it is, but I'm also not going to openly. I don't need to name drop. Like it is what it is. I'm not trying to stir the pot, like overflow it, but I'm definitely trying to like shake it up a little bit, if you know what I mean. Like I think it absolutely needs to be known that that's not good coaching, and it's all cookie cutter. It's he brings people in super lean, but they're starving. None of his athletes grow because he caps them at a cookie cutter plan at a maintenance level calorie. Um, and bottom line is, if you want to grow, you got to eat. Bottom line, you've got to put on body fat. Bottom line, I mean, if you do it smart and you work with a coach that does it the right way, you put on minimal body fat in your growth season. Um, I definitely didn't do it correctly, so don't use me as an example of an ideal growth season. However, it's out there, it's doable, it's possible. It's just a matter of finding somebody who knows what the hell they're doing. And basically, the coach that I used, very old school bodybuilding, he brings people dialed in. I have no objection to that. But bottom line is I can't wait for the day that I step on stage, beat his athletes, just because it's him, not his athletes. Think the world of anybody that does this sport. I can't wait to beat his athletes just to prove that I can do this eating food, healthy, and still win the overall and get my pro card. Like I cannot wait.
That's great. And one thing that I think I love to ask too is how do you think, because you're actually in this industry? I mean, I just talk to people, so I don't really have a good gist of things. But how do you think that this problem gets solved? Because I've heard this, like I said, I've heard your story multiple times from people, and it's just something that I look at and I'm just like, how can you fix this? Because I think it, especially when you're dealing with like stuff where people are really high in the industry and you can't really do. But how do you think that this problem gets fixed and people find a more healthy way to bodybuild as opposed to what the old school bodybuilding, which is like, yeah, you just basically starve yourself, to be honest.
I think that number one, if your coach has never stepped on stage and never competed, how are they ever going to know what you go through as an athlete? Even if they don't have an IFBB pro card or any of that crap, which new coach that I use, he does. He's self coached. He got his IFBB pro card in 2 years, self coached. He hired a coach recently, I think in the last year or so, because he's going to the Olympia. So, what better way to do that than with a coach that has more experience than you than in the industry? Um, Nutrition, the science and the education behind how your body works and what food can do for you is constantly improving. I mean, it's kind of like the medical field. Like you look at modern medicine, it's like it's constantly changing as people learn. If you have a coach that's not constantly updating and trying to learn the new things and learning new techniques, like there's more than one way to skin a cat, and not every athlete is the same. And I think that number one, I think the number one problem is with this last coach and a lot of people using him and a lot of athletes going through the same process that I did and not knowing any differently is nobody will talk about it. Everyone is so afraid of what this man can do to them. And it's like, what is he going to do?
He might be a part of the mafia. You never know.
Oh, I've got 4 working dogs that'll take an arm off. Like, come at me,
Hey,
bro.
Dave the goat's got something to say to him for sure.
They just like gas
Get
out.
Dave in a rut or in a heat, and then just unleash him on the guy.
Right. No, and I hope that people know, like, I take full accountability for what I went through. Bottom line is I was the one who agreed to keep pushing. I was the one who agreed to do the cardio and follow the meal plan. I was the one who stuck with the coach through the process. But at the same time, I learned from it. I know that there's got to be a better way. And I accept the accountability from my part. But at the same time, I want people to know that there's better ways. There's healthier ways. I can think of multiple athletes with hormonal issues that are just screwed up for life because of this person, and that's not okay. I honestly think that when you're looking for a coach, ask them how many clients they have, because if somebody's working with 1,000 people, they don't have time for the specific tailored needs that you need. I mean, you can stick anybody on a cookie cutter diet and they'll lose weight, but you might end up being like you're going to starve. I mean, that's essentially what's happening is I guarantee you he's a busy man. But if you're that busy that you can't focus on your athletes and what they need, I mean, my check-ins were never more than 5 text messages. I've talked to this man twice in person in my life. And even still, like, it was never like a full conversation. He never asked me about any sort of like, he never asked me any personal information. I mean, this new coach that I've hired, I check in with him twice a week. He's FaceTimed me 3 times in the last 2 weeks. Both times that we've FaceTime, it's been 45-minute conversations going over my plan, going over how I'm feeling. And granted, like, he probably doesn't have as many athletes, but that's what coaching is it's you charge a rate that you can cap your number of people and still make a good income. You know, you cap it at 30, 40 people or whatever, but you charge enough that you can make a living because people will pay for that. People will pay for good coaching. And if you aren't willing to pay for good coaching, you'll get the results for it. So
Yeah, and I thank you so much for saying that, for holding yourself accountable, because I can guarantee if you didn't, the first comment would be, well, she knew what she was getting into, she could have just quit or whatever. Like, and it's like, no, duh, but it's like, obviously, I'm not gonna compare.
I trust my
I'm not going
coach.
to compare any of this to like a sexual assault survivor, but that's kind of like just saying to someone, "Oh, you shouldn't have gone with him on the date." Then basically, then if you didn't want to get, yeah,
Dude,
it's just like that.
literally every time that you talk to one of his athletes, it is an emotionally abusive relationship without
Oh,
the
it's me too.
sex.
Yeah, basically, it's emotional me too. Yeah, basically, yeah.
It's it's absurd. And yeah, you can play the blame game all day. I fully accept that I put myself in a situation. But you also, like,
That
you have
doesn't
no
that
idea.
doesn't that doesn't mean that you deserve to be treated like that just because you put
Right.
yourself in this situation. That's the stupidest. But there's gonna be idiots out there, regardless of what we say. They're gonna come to that conclusion. It's like, dude, put yourself in her shoes.
Well, and not only that, like, you put yourself on 500 calories a day, expending probably 33 to 4,000 calories a day, and tell me where your mental stability is. Tell me how easy it is for you to freaking think about what's best for me. Dude, I don't even know how I was driving. Like, I honestly look back and I'm like, I should be dead. Whether it's because I mean, he's had athletes pass out on ellipticals or on cart or on treadmills. It's like you put your faith in somebody who claims they know what they're doing, who you believe has your best interests at heart, and you trust the process. And when things aren't going right, it's not because his plan is actually shit. It's because you did something wrong or this or that. And it's like, no, there's better ways to do this sport. And this is a hard sport, and like this is a hard enough sport. It doesn't need to be that hard. It doesn't need to be enduring pain and suffering through starvation. Like your food gets low enough. And then, don't get me wrong, like if it was Olympia and I thought that I was going to be stage ready in 5 days, I would have been like, suck it up, it's 5 days. But it was a local show. I would have maybe placed top 3. And if I'm going through that bullshit, I better be taking the overall.
Yeah, watch you get last
So,
then, and then see what happens. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, like seriously. And not only that, but like what I had wished had happened if I had asked him multiple times, I said, if you think that I'll be stage ready, which means first place in my mind, I will push. I will do it. But if you don't think I'm going to be there, this is 2.5 weeks out. Before I was that low, I was probably, 900 calories at this point. Or at least eating fats. I said, if you don't think that I'm going to be ready, let's just save my money. I lost $700 all said and done because I didn't do the show. That's not, I mean, that's a lot of money for me. I think it's a lot of money for anybody, but especially like my circumstances, like I've got a mortgage to pay. Like I could have saved that for something else. I've got dogs to feed, whatever. Anyways, I asked if we should just maybe do there's a show in October. I was like, do we wait and do October? Or do I push for this August show? And he's like, you're close. You're almost there. Like, let's keep pushing. And it's like a good coach, if I wasn't going to come in dialed in the way that I needed to, would have said, let's reevaluate the plan. But instead, I mean, and don't get me wrong, like, of course, I probably would have been disappointed if after going through that kind of a cut, like going back to the accountability, like I fully accept what I put myself through. But I also had faith that I was going to be where I wanted to be by going through that kind of hell. And I wasn't.
Well, and I think that's one of the big problems with that too, is like you said, too many clients where they can't really specialize too much on the client, where that's one of the reasons why I only release 2 or 3 podcasts a week, because believe me, everyone knows that's watches podcasts knows that I could literally talk to 10 people every single day and get, 10-hour long podcasts basically done. But I'm not able to do all that stuff myself and do all the, because I do just all this by myself, where it's like, I think people, they do over swamp things, and then they just have this general cookie cutter way of saying, oh, it's worked for this many people, it's going to work for her. But everyone is built differently. That's a theme that I love to preach on this. And it's just, people sometimes, they get too lost in the financials, and they get too lost in, other things, that they forget about the people that experience it and the people that do it. So, I mean, you telling the story is just so great, and I really appreciate that you did. And I hope it does make some waves, and I hope it does make people realize that might be like afraid to talk. It's like, no, you can talk, tell your story. I mean, it's like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Just get a different coach, basically. Then, I mean, it's ridiculous. But what are some of the reasons, other than the backlash, that you feel that other people haven't talked about it as much as it should be? Because this should be something that everyone should be aware of, in my opinion.
And honestly, I hate to compare it to the kind of Me Too movement, because it's definitely, I mean, it may or may not be the same extreme.
It can be just as devastating, the mental effects of it, than the physical effects, for sure. Yeah.
So that being said, I almost hope that me being the person to kind of talk about it first, or there might be other people that have talked about it. And if anybody reaches out to me, like I'm happy to disclose my story or talk about it more or go into depth about who the coach is. With it being a podcast, I don't necessarily want to, like I said, like I'm willing to stir the pot, but I'm not trying to drown in it. So, I hope that other people are willing to come forward about it. I mean, I'm not trying to hide anything by any means. And I think that if someone else can learn from my mistakes, and if it can prevent other people, I mean, I have friends that I'm literally pulling out of the same situation. I mean, he loses athletes left and right for a reason. He just doesn't disclose it. I mean, he's just got so many people that work with him that he doesn't need to hide it, or that he doesn't need to to worry about it. And you have all of these novice people coming in and, oh, he's a big name. They just see the results, right? People don't see what you go through. They don't see the hard work, which is bodybuilding in general, but especially that. Um, and if I can prevent somebody else that wants to get into the sport from going through that kind of hell and understanding that that's not the real process, why not? Like, if you it's kind of going back to the Me Too, like, if you can prevent someone else from going through that same traumatic experience, why wouldn't you try and help someone?
Absolutely. And yeah, it's just yeah, it's heavy stuff, but I mean, I'm glad that we were able to talk about it. I'm glad that you're doing better from it now, and you're able to get away from that, and that's just so great.